makeup remover for the planet. How the European Union is scrubbing away the harmful chemicals linked to cosmetic and pharmaceutical industries. And tracking deadly heat, a new tool at your disposal to keep you and your family safe during the summer months to come. Plus, an old coal power station in Australia might be coming online again. This time, the owners say with zero emissions. What their inventive new power source could do for the grid. Hello and welcome to EarthX News, where we focus on sustainability, conservation, and the environment. I'm Christina Thompson. Let's get into some of the biggest headlines facing our planet. The Bureau of Land Management announced an end to coal leasing on federal lands in the Powder River Basin, affecting over 13 million public acres across Montana and Wyoming. The basin accounts for about 44% of all U.S. coal production, producing around 260 million tons of coal in the year 2022. Assessments from the Bureau of Land Management will permit current federal leases to be preserved, which will allow for continued mining through 2040 in Wyoming and through 2060 in Montana. Republican lawmakers across both states have spoken out against these new rules, with Wyoming Governor Mark Gordon promising to look at legal options to challenge this rule. A coalition of Republican lawmakers led by Nebraska Attorney General Mike Hilgers is challenging a California draft law which seeks to drastically reduce emissions on certain vehicles. The proposed law would mandate that half of all medium and heavy-duty vehicles acquired by state and local governments would be emissions-free between 2024 and 2026. As part of the statement, Attorney General Hilgers said, quote, "This effort, coming at a time of heightened inflation and with an already strained electrical grid, will devastate the trucking and logistics industry, raise prices for consumers, and impact an untold number of jobs across Nebraska and the country." In 2022, the Biden administration restored California's ability to set its own emission standards after their right was revoked by the previous administration. Just over a month ago, a federal court ruled that California can continue to impose this authority granted to them by President Biden. In addition, California is now seeking a federal government waiver to ban the sale of all newly manufactured gas-powered vehicles by 2035. There's a new government system in place to help keep you and your family safe from dangerously high temperatures. It's called Heat Risk, and it's an online tool that provides a 7-day forecast for heat waves across the country. The map will have real-time and forecasted heat and air quality information as part of a broader effort to keep people safe from heat and the medical risks it can cause. Extreme heat is now the deadliest type of weather event in the U.S., killing more people each year than floods, extreme cold, and tornadoes. Officials with NOAA say they hope these new resources will help communities plan for the upcoming summer months, with temperatures through May and June expected to be above average nationwide. And while the tool has been publicly released, the project is still under active development. Members of the public can submit feedback to the National Weather Service through the end of September. A group of governors headed to Vatican City for a 3-day climate summit hosted by Pope Francis, as the church and state came together recently to inspire care for the earth. Alex Salvi has more.
Two of the most high-profile Democrats in the United States are bringing their calls for climate action to the Holy See.
The climate crisis.
California Governor Gavin Newsom and his counterpart from New York, Kathy Hochul, speaking at a climate summit in Vatican City earlier this month. Newsom, personally invited by Pope Francis, using the opportunity to praise the steps that California has taken to lead the charge in promoting climate-friendly policies, not only in the United States, but around the world.
But at our best, we believe the world, in many respects, looks to us to see that it's possible to live together and advance together across many imaginable differences. That absolutely is the case when it comes to the issue of addressing the crisis of our time and climate change.
He explains throughout the state's history, from Republican Governor Ronald Reagan up to his Democratic leadership, the environment has been at the center of California's decision-making.
There's an entire state.
New York Governor Kathy Hochul referenced a lesson from her parents that people have a responsibility to one another, a virtue she says guides her perspective when dictating climate policy.
These are the lessons that I take with me when I approach the issue of climate change and ask, is there justice for all? And sadly, the answer is not yet. We're on a quest, And that is what our Holy Father put us on a quest to do this morning.
The two governors have an ally in Pope Francis, who routinely speaks on the level of care that worshippers should show to nature, calling on politicians to make radical decisions to protect the planet for future generations. And with partners in California and New York, the potential for transformative new policies is very much so alive. For EarthX, I'm Alex Salvi.
Alex Salvi, thank you. Turning now to wildlife news. Grizzly bears will soon be reintroduced at a national park in Washington. The National Park Service and U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service have announced a decision to actively restore grizzly bears to the North Cascades. The agencies will seek to release 3 to 7 bears a year over the next 5 to 10 years in an effort to establish an initial population of 25 bears. Now, once the initial goal is reached, a population of 200 bears would be likely in about 60 to 100 years, according to the agencies. Federal wildlife officials say the North Cascades is an area where the bears once roamed, and they were a pillar of the local ecosystem. Grizzly bears are listed as threatened under the Endangered Species Act. The reintroduction plan is part of the government's efforts to help the species recover. A federally threatened species recently slithered off into the wild to do some good in Florida's Panhandle. In a joint collaboration between state wildlife officials and several conservation groups, dozens of eastern indigo snakes were released at a preserve along the Apalachicola River as part of an ongoing effort to strengthen the species population and restore the state's longleaf pine ecosystem. According to wildlife officials, the non-venomous snakes play a key role in balancing the environment by consuming a variety of small animals. Biologists also say the conservation project is helping the species thrive. The Nature Conservancy Group, one of the organizations involved, said during the past year, several snakes from previous releases have been spotted, including 2 wild-born hatchlings. And scientists say finding the offspring is a step closer to achieving a self-sustaining wild indigo population. The species used to be found throughout the southeast in the 1980s, but their range was limited due to habitat loss from various causes, including fragmentation and development. However, researchers are hopeful recent conservation efforts will help the eastern indigo snake make a comeback. A tiny and critically endangered fish appears to be making a recovery. Biologists were left stunned after they recently counted a record amount of devil's hole pupfish at a Nevada section of Death Valley National Park. Researchers say they discovered a population of 191 pupfish, which is the highest in 25 years, during the spring season fish count. The resurgence comes after the species had a very close brush with extinction just a few years ago, reaching an all-time low of 35 in 2013. Scientists say at one time, roughly 200 to 250 specimens were counted in the annual springtime census. Biologists say the tiny neon blue fish are vulnerable to extinction because their habitats can't support large populations, and their small numbers make them more susceptible to threats like pollution, the introduction of non-native species, and groundwater depletion that could limit their ability to spawn. An environmental makeup remover. Cosmetic and pharmaceutical companies within the EU will now have to clean up their messes by covering at least 80% of the costs needed to eliminate pollutants from sources of urban wastewater. According to the European Commission, over 90% of harmful pollutants originate from these cosmetic and pharmaceutical companies. Urban wastewater, if not collected and treated properly, is one of the main sources of water pollution. Also, these companies will be responsible for removing micropollutants, while local governments will be tasked with monitoring their sewage for other harmful contaminants such as microplastics. These new rules were mandated by the new draft rules in the EU. The minister of the government of the Brussels capital region released a statement which reads in part, quote, "Today's agreement with the Parliament puts us on the right track to reach our zero pollution objective for Europe." When it comes to inventive ways to store CO2, a herd of bison might just take the cake. A study published in Nature Climate Change shows how a single herd of bison has the potential to store 54,000 tons of carbon annually. That's the equivalent of taking 40,000 cars off the road. And they do this just by being bison. Grazing evenly, recycling nutrients, dispersing seeds, and compacting soil are all ways that bison contribute to their ecosystem and help to prevent stored carbon from being released. But it's not just bison. The study expands their findings to other large mammals as well, suggesting reintroducing these species could be a revolutionary, nature-based solution for climate change. Rewilding animals such as whales, sea otters, and elephants could significantly increase the carbon storage potential of their respective ecosystems. Scientists are now looking to study other high-potential species, including primates, fruit bats, and turtles. The owners of a former coal-fired power plant came up with a creative way to turn an invasive weed in Australia into power. Essentially, the power plant would burn millions of tons of the weed to power the station and help farmers get rid of it in the process. The company behind the inventive idea, Verdant Earth Technologies, says restarting the power plant in this way would support wind and solar and batteries and would give Australia the energy security it needs, utilizing its massive natural resources. Plus, the plant's owners say the power plant would generate zero emissions. Still, some environmentalists are skeptical. The concern is largely to do with tree clearing and the impacts that will have on the local environment. According to the Australian energy market operator, Australia's last coal generators will be closed within the next 15 years, which means there could be an energy shortfall that could happen as early as next year. Some experts believe biomass won't take up a large role on the grid. In the long term, the company says it aims to grow fuel on its own land, but for now, these native weeds troubling local farmers will do just fine. Coming up, researchers are working to perfect floating offshore wind turbines. Stay tuned. We have more on their efforts just ahead on EarthX News. The United States is getting their own version of a groundbreaking effort to harness clean, renewable energy overseas. A Scotland-based company named Orbital Marine Power, which created the first floating tidal turbine in 2021, is bringing that same technology to the coast off Washington state. Last year, the U.S. government announced a $35 million investment in tidal energy initiatives. A portion of that investment, about $6 million, went to Orbital Marine Power and another company named Ocean Renewable Power Company, pitting the two companies in direct competition with one another to receive future federal funding. Tidal turbines use a special generator to convert energy from flowing water into clean, usable electricity, similar to how wind turbines harness air fluidity. Currently, only a handful of floating turbines are in operation across the globe, with the largest of those residing off the coast of South Korea. Meanwhile, scientists at the University of Maine are exploring a new type of wind turbine technology meant to harness the wind power over deeper ocean waters. The concept being tested, a floating offshore wind farm. Joining us now to discuss is one of the researchers involved with developing the floating offshore wind turbines, Dr. Habib Dagher, Executive Director at the University of Maine Advanced Structures and Composites Center. Dr. Habib, thank you so much for coming on. So what exactly is a floating offshore wind farm? How does it work?
Good to be with you. Yeah, a floating turbine is needed when the water depth is typically bigger than 150 feet, deeper than that. And you can't fix a turbine to the seabed. In this case, you'd have to float it. As you see here in the video, you have a turbine floating over the water, and that's moored to the seabed using mooring lines, just like you would moor a ship in the seabed.
So what are some of the benefits to doing a wind turbine farm this way?
Yeah, there's a number of benefits, but first let's start with the resource. Within 50 miles of the U.S. coast, there's enough offshore wind capacity to power the country 4 times over. But about 2/3 of that energy is in deeper water. The other advantage of that is you can put these turbines far enough from shore where the wind's typically much better in most places, but also you can't see it from shore. So if you're 30 or 35 miles away from shore, those turbines essentially will disappear behind the horizon.
Are there any potential dangers with having a wind farm in this way, and what maintenance challenges do they face?
Certainly, there are a number of engineering challenges, as you might imagine, developing a turbine that floats and that will sustain hurricane-type winds. So the key to the engineering here is designing for these 150 mile per hour winds and 70-foot tall waves, in essence, so they don't tip over. And then we've already put some of these units out there, like the one you see behind me, has seen 500-year storms. And in a 500-year storm, it moved off vertical only 6 degrees. The other important challenge is where to put these turbines to protect the environments and the ecology, the fisheries, and other users of the ocean.
Can you expand a little bit on that, what the potential impact on the marine life could be?
Certainly, offshore wind turbines have been used in Europe now since 1991. So there's over 5,000 turbines installed right now, but 99% of them are fixed bottom, so they're fixed to the seabed. The important piece is to place these turbines in areas that minimize impact on marine mammals, for example, from any noise that might be generated, but also get them away from locations where there may be significant birds and activities and bad activities and so forth. So placing these further out offshore will take care of a lot of these problems.
People always ask, what's the cost? How does it compare to offshore wind farms, to onshore wind farms? How would you bring this to scale?
Certainly, there's been a lot of studies to help answer that question. And like you said, the key item is how do you bring it to scale? If you can get this technology to scale, a lot of data shows it'll be to have parity of costs. But in general, floating offshore wind is expected, when it's scaled up, to be competitive with fixed bottom offshore wind in the U.S. and across the globe.
When do you think that would be? When do you think it could become competitive? Is there a timeline that you are hoping to reach?
Yes, so there's some national targets, if you wish, that's been developed by the Department of Energy and by the U.S. government. I would say in the mid-2030s is when we believe it would be scaled up enough to drive the cost down.
What's your hope for the future when it comes to harvesting wind energy?
Certainly, this technology, the floating wind technology, would be part of the solution to the future to help reduce our reliance on fossil fuels and protect the environment. So depending where you are in the world, you will see a combination of renewable resources, and this would be another tool that we have in our toolbox to create clean energy in different parts of the world.
It sounds like there's a lot of really amazing advances to come in the future. Thank you so much for coming on, and thank you for all the work that you're doing towards sustainable energy.
Thank you. It's great to be with you.
Coming up, scientists studying sperm whales believe they've made a breakthrough when it comes to learning about how whales communicate. That story is just ahead on EarthX News. Welcome back. A group of scientists say they might have discovered the basic building blocks of how sperm whales communicate with each other, and researchers say learning more about how the animals talk may help marine biologists better protect them in the future. Caleb Park reports.
Sperm whales are one of the largest whales in the ocean, and researchers now know their alphabet, similar to ours, is much more complex than previously thought.
When you look at the complex behavior of whales, whales live together in social pods. They dive together, they search for food together, they birth babies together, and they do so in a way that is so helpful of each other. All of this seems to happen through this complex communication.
Scientists say whales use a series of snaps and pops they call codas to communicate with each other. Computer scientists, biologists, and others used artificial intelligence to decode part of their language. And after analysis of 8,000 of these codas, scientists say they believe they form an alphabet used to create words and phrases. But cracking the codas is going to be more difficult than deciphering Morse code. Millions more will have to be analyzed before AI can figure out what they're telling each other.
It seems like we have a phonetic alphabet for sperm whales, but we have no idea what they say.
So the research into sperm whale communication continues. Scientists hope the new information helps contribute to ongoing whale conservation efforts so we can know what underwater secrets the whales have been keeping all these years. For EarthX, I'm Caleb Park.
Caleb Park, thank you. Some recent research finds orangutans can self-medicate. The discovery comes after researchers started documenting the habits of an injured orangutan named Rachis. Scientists say the ape was spotted using a medicinal plant to treat a cut on his face. Researchers say Rachis mashed up the herb, made it into a paste, and applied it to the wound, and even used a leaf as a makeshift Band-Aid. Scientists say it's the first time they've seen an orangutan treating itself in this way. Experts say it's unclear how Rachis learned this behavior, but they have a theory. Listen.
He continued chewing but stopped swallowing and put the plant sap from his mouth precisely onto the wound. And he repeated this behavior for 7 minutes. So over and over, he put plant sap onto the wound. And then later, he also took the more solid plant matter from his mouth and put it on top of his wound, fully covering the wound. So it's possible that the behavior is actually shown in his birth population, and he might have learned it from his mother or another orangutan.
Researchers believe the orangutan got hurt in a fight with another animal, and photographs show the animal's laceration closed within 2 months without any problems. And before we leave you, the world's oldest zoo welcomes an adorable new member. Staffers at the Schönbrunn Zoo in Vienna recently celebrated the birth of an endangered northern rockhopper penguin. Video from the penguin's enclosure shows the chick enjoying a cuddle session with its parents before zookeepers brought it inside for a snack and a brief checkup. Zoo officials say the youngster is healthy and happy, and talk about timing. The little one hatched just ahead of World Penguin Day, which is celebrated annually on April 25th. That's it for this edition of EarthX News. Please join us again next week. I'm Christina Thompson.